let me make the pitch to our Nuggets fans here that are, joining us as we talk about other teams that are still playing basketball right now. It's all very sad, I know. Uh, One of my favorite things to do is find guys that Denver should try to target both in free agency and in trades. We had what was that draft that we did last year, Will, that was like your ideal Nuggets bench? And it was just half Mavs and half Pacers
Oh yeah, our
players.
ideal bench. Yeah.
No, but it's good to watch these games, see how other guys are doing, see what other teams are up to, see how styles are changing, see how different teams are guarding each other, to get an idea of like, is Denver falling behind in this regard? And I think, honestly, in our first segment here, we're going to talk about Wolves Thunder in the Western Conference Finals. And this is a great sort of canvas for that because we're talking about the two teams that have eliminated Denver from the playoffs in subsequent years, right? Currently, the Thunder are up 3-1 after a very dramatic game four, I would say. I think it's been the only like fun, like down to the wire, back and forth kind of game. Although I wouldn't say back and forth because the Thunder like led for most of it, but Minnesota made it a game. But it's been a strange series. I'll just give the quick recap and then we're gonna dive into game four specifically. Game one, nasty, nasty defensive game. I think the Wolves actually jumped out early because OKC just couldn't shoot. But then eventually the Thunder like fully stifled them. I don't even think the Wolves scored 90 points in that game. Um, Game two was another nasty defensive game, but this was, I think, an even worse one for Minnesota because the Thunder were getting whatever they wanted on offense. SGA was allowed to go one on one, and he was completely comfortable with every defender in front of him. Jaden, Nikhil, Mike Conley, it seemed like was a problem on the floor, but when he was off the floor, the Wolves couldn't score. It was just a disaster of a game for Minnesota. After the Wolves go down 0-2 going home, everyone's thinking like, is this going to be a sweep? Obviously, it was not because in game three, the Wolves came out and they completely smacked OKC. I thought they did a much better job of sticking to like the quote unquote game plan for SGA, which is packing the paint, living with the jump shots. Don't let him get to the rim. You have to live with the jump shots. And if you're not going to do that, you have to get the ball out of his hands. So that was a problem in game two was they couldn't get the ball out of his hands. He was allowed to go one on one. And the issue wasn't the shots he was making. It was all the free throws he was drawing. And that stops the game, lets OKC set their defense, their half court defense, and you're in the mud the entire time. In game three, Minnesota did a much better job of not allowing him to kind of like what Shador is saying here. Minnesota cannot execute Denver's defense on Shea at all. They are allowing him to ISO constantly. Adelman is out coaching Finch. Well, I mean, I wouldn't say that because Adelman's not going up against Finch directly. Shador is contrasting our defense in not letting Shea go ISO until game seven when AG got hurt. Yeah. That was kind of the narrative coming out of the first two games of this series is like, why is it that Denver can defend OKC better than Minnesota can? And we kind of seeing a similar story after game four, which was another game in which Minnesota could not stop the Thunder, like at all. Well, I don't know how many games of this series you've watched outside of game four, but what is your impression of Minnesota's defensive game plan and discipline based on game four?
So game one I watched just because I was so curious to see how these teams matched up, how competitive is it gonna be. Granted, game one can be one of the weirdest games of a series,
Feel
for
out
sure.
game, yeah.
Yeah, I always say game one's probably the one that matters the least. Sadly, it kind of came to bite the Nuggets since we won game one against the Thunder and still didn't win that series. Anyway, that game, man, the refing in that game drove me insane.
In
Game
game
two
four?
and game one. So
Oh,
I watched the game in its entirety. Then game two and three I missed because I was on the boycott train, trying to spread the word to NBA fans to not watch this stuff. Send a message to the league. I did think, or at least from what I saw on the timeline and all
I
that.
was not aware that this was a thing.
Oh yeah, this was a thing. I was like, do not watch this series. Don't reward the NBA with how they're officiating these two teams and the Thunder so differently than how they officiate against the Nuggets. So I was all in on not watching it. But I do think game two was better. I didn't see as many like crazy controversial plays with Shea, let's say. Game three was a huge blowout, so I didn't watch that one because I was actually busy. Game four, I
Bill
didn't
has a
watch.
life, people.
Game four, I also didn't watch, but I watched the highlights today and like went back and looked at the possessions and all that, and really came down to that fourth quarter. I think I can't. Yeah, no, yeah. Where the was Minnesota up in the fourth when it started?
I think it
Can't
was tied
remember.
at one point. Maybe they took a 1 point lead at one point.
Yeah, I think
They
the
just couldn't get stopped. I was like, they're scoring. They're like making all their shots. I think Nikhil Alexander Walker going 5 of 8 from three was a godsend for them because they were making good kick out passes, but like Ant and Julius weren't even allowed to touch the paint. These weren't paint touch threes. These were like, I got to get rid of the ball. Let me like quickly try to find the open man and then maybe swing to a guy. And it was often Nikhil Alexander Walker. He took 8 threes, but he made 5 of them. I think that's the only reason Minnesota was in this game because it's not like their offense was like easy either, but they couldn't get a stop down the stretch of this game, throughout the game, but especially in the fourth quarter. I don't even know how many like empty possessions the Thunder even had in that fourth quarter.
and why J Dub is in the thumbnail of this episode. I thought he was just insane at the end of the game, and if they're trying to load
Yeah.
up on Shea or take or force the ball out of his hands, they were leaving J Dub super open. I think on a lot of those threes, trying to
Yeah,
stop
they were.
Shea, and damn, J Dub made them pay. So yeah, he really did amazing to like close the game out, made huge shots. It did get like close there. I will say, seeing the final score and then going back and watching it, the Thunder were more like in control of the end of that game than I thought. It was kind of like this late, weird, kind of fluky three that I think it was Jaden McDaniels or somebody hit to make the game a
Yeah.
lot closer. But still, Thunder going with the like fouling up three thing that's now becoming this whole discussion. Uh, kind of smothered the Timberwolves there, which that was the kind of strategy that allowed us to beat them in that game one in our
Yeah, they
series, which is
weren't
funny.
doing it with like 20
Yeah,
seconds with like
much
Ant off
smarter,
the floor or anything like that.
much smarter execution.
One of the things with OKC's offense in this game, and I think also in game two, we've seen a lot more or at all Kenrich Williams in this series. He did not play in our series outside of garbage time. We had a lot more Aaron Wiggins, which I think that's an interesting choice by Dagnall because I just wonder why, like what drives him seeing this as like that different of a matchup that you're like, I want this like slashing driver to be our, eighth guy, ninth guy versus uh Kenrich Williams being a sort of pick and pop big. Like I'm not sure the defensive matchup is all that different. And if anything, wouldn't you want more size against Jokic, which the Wolves are bigger on aggregate, but Denver plays bigger in like the types of things that they go to, which is like the post a lot, right? We saw a lot of Kenrich Williams and Alex Caruso in place of Isaiah Hartenstein. I think that allowed Chet to get a lot more aggressive in this game. J-Dub was awesome. Like this was like a clear like, wow, the big three of OKC coming into their own kind of game for Shea, Chet, and J-Dub here because they were just finally all great in the same game. We hadn't really seen that in any of the playoffs. And I'm not saying it's going to be the norm, but I think this was a clear reason for it. I think that Chet in particular really needs to be played at the 5 in order to be effective offensively. Uh, it's one of the things I just didn't understand about Dagnall's strategy in our series. Like, I don't think that series had to go to 7, but OKC couldn't score, and Dagnall refused to go small for anything larger than short stretches. And even in this game, like Chet only plays 32 minutes in this game, even though it goes down to the wire. He's playing small in other ways, like, it doesn't rely on Chet being on the floor, but, like, part of the benefit of that is, like, if you go small, Chet has more space to attack, he can attack slower bigs in space, and he was doing that. He was also bullying some of Minnesota's players that are smaller than him, and just getting to the rim. Uh, I think a lot of people will, highlight the big threes that he made in the 4th quarter, but I think that came with the confidence from he was just getting layups and dunks all night up until that point.
Yeah. Put
Um,
back dunks,
yeah,
dunks off drives, super aggressive.
put back dunks. I'm glad you, mentioned that because Minnesota could not keep the Thunder off of the offensive glass. Like, everyone points to, like, they had more offensive rebounds, they grabbed more of their misses, like, Minnesota grabbed 56% of their misses. They should be, they're the bigger team. But they let the Thunder grab 47% of their misses. Just for reference for people, the number I'm looking at when I look at a team's defensive rebounding percentage is, like, you gotta get it above, like, 70%. That's still low, but when it's lower than that, it's, like, danger zone. We're talking about, like, last year's Oklahoma City Thunder, which had no centers. Uh when you're talking about, letting another team grab more than 30% of their misses. The Thunder were grabbing 47% of their misses, and they had well over 20 second chance points in this game. So even when Minnesota was able to get a stop in the half court, they couldn't close out the possession.
Even in these big moments,
Yeah.
because and it's just killer. You need to get a stop. You finally get it. You don't. They get a shot out of it. Sometimes it can be an open shot, as it can be on an offensive rebound, because players are already scrambled on the previous
Yeah,
play. Sometimes
exactly.
it's a result of
And it
ant.
felt like the Thunder hit every single, like, shot to punish
Yeah.
those plays, those, like, offensive
Ugh,
rebound kick out
they
plays. There were none where I'm like, "Ooh, Minnesota dodged a bullet." They didn't dodge any bullets.
yeah, they
They just kept taking hits.
they completely killed them off that.
Yeah,
Which is a result of, I think you can criticize certain players on the Wolves who didn't do as good of a job, like boxing out like Ant
yeah.
and other players that I don't know. Yeah, Julius Randle probably. But a lot of the times it's like you're focusing so hard on playing defense against this team. And even though the Wolves are really good defensively, the Thunder have a lot of threats. Shea has a lot of gravity just on the ball. J-Dub can make you pay off the ball if you're playing too hard on Shea or whoever. Got random dudes can make threes on this team. So even if you're like rotating and shooting the gaps, it's going to put you out of position for rebounding. And I feel like the Wolves were really focusing on that and trying to rotate really hard to stay in the game. And sometimes like offensive rebounding is a little bit luck, like it's going to bounce the wrong way or you're
Sure.
not going to be in the right
But when you're
spot.
talking
But
about 47% of these, it's like, man, you gotta here's my thing with, like, schematically what was happening there, right? One of the things that Minnesota was doing a lot in this game that was a departure, frankly, from what they did in game 3 in terms of volume, because they kind of vary up schemes throughout the game in both of these last 2 games. Um, but they switched Rudy out into the perimeter a lot, and a lot of those were the times where, like, Rudy doesn't grab a lot of rebounds in this game, but he's playing out on the perimeter, like, trying to guard isolations. Or I think OKC did a good job in a lot of cases of, like, okay, we've got Rudy switched onto the perimeter. Now we're gonna move the ball around and have somebody else beat a wolf off the dribble, put up a shot, and make or miss. We're gonna crash, and the other wolves were just like ball watching, not prepared for um these Thunder guards. And I have my note here. The guards were crashing. I mean, it's all guards on the Thunder, but the guards were crashing all over the place. And I thought that they used their speed as a weapon to win this margin. They didn't win the margin of offensive rebounding because the Wolves did grab more, but it's one of those margins where it's like the other team against the Thunder, you have to win that margin. So you need to win it by more than they did, and it's usually associated with strength. But the Thunder were able to win it with speed because these quick guards would just dart in from the perimeter and grab these offensive rebounds. I think part of it is that, yeah, Chet got some offensive rebound putbacks and that kind of thing too. But a lot of OKC's misses in this game were short. So they were like kind of flying back out to the perimeter. But even still, it was just like totally killer, right? Especially for a team in Minnesota that should be good on the glass, had been in some of the games in the series. And other ones, it was like, oh, Isaiah Hartenstein is like beating Rudy down there. Rudy just needs to be better. But in this game, it was really the whole team.
I just think it's really hard to beat OKC when SGA and J-Dub are like as good as they were offensively. I kind of think like the Thunder have this series in their hands. Like I think similarly, we were talking about the Nuggets having the series in their hands versus the Thunder, and it was like you just had to like execute your game plan a little bit, find ways to play your way and pull the series out. The Thunder are kind of like that. Like they have the ability, I think, to dictate like the game to game, and when they're not winning, it's like kind of on their own mistakes. And like the story to me is a lot of how the Wolves are able to try to attack OKC's defense, and right now it's just not consistent enough.
Yeah, I mean, I like I said, the offense, I didn't love the process throughout the game because they weren't even able to get into the paint. And that's a credit to OKC's defense more than anything. Like this is one of the reasons that I picked the Thunder for this series, and I think it's a terrible matchup for Minnesota because their offense, like, can't do anything else, especially with Mike Conley is off the floor. It's like Ant and Julius have to be able to touch the paint in order to generate offense, and they kind of have to be able to do it on that first touch, or everything breaks down. They just don't have enough playmakers on this team, and their 2 best players aren't versatile enough to figure out other ways to generate things. Julius also goes 1 of 7 from the field in this game. I didn't even realize that he only took 7 shots. I felt like he made more than 1, but I guess not. Um, that's just a tough look for them. Uh, Randall, yeah, we knew Randall would have a bad series when he tries to post up Caruso and Dort and realizes what Jokic had to deal with. This is the thing, is like from game one, I'm watching Julius Randall try to post these guys up. I'm like, this is not the offense that they should be running. In the games where Julius was successful, which included like stretches of game one, and definitely in game three, he was facing up. And that was something that I wanted Jokic to do more of in that series, and I feel like Julius has a more refined face-up game, but they were trying to post up a lot again in this game, and it resulted in turnovers. It resulted in getting doubled very quickly. Like it, I think OKC did a better job in this game of swarming. Like my impression of their blowout loss in game three was that like that was the first game, or it reminded me of their game three against us, honestly, where but it was worse in that I was like, OKC didn't really bring the intensity to, like, grab them by the necks in this game. But in game 4, I felt like that difference was definitely palpable. Like, when they wanna strangle you, you'll know. And it's funny because like, the Wolves still put up, like, 120 some points in this game, but again, it was because, like, the kind of bad kick out threes that were coming out of the little offense they were able to make were going down for these role players. Dante was making shots, Nikhil was making shots, Nas was making shots. Um, I'm like that's why I'm more like focusing on the defense of this game is like, yeah, the offense wasn't great, but they still put up points, but they could not get a stop to save their lives, which they needed to save their playoff lives in this game and they couldn't.
I guess I'm more fascinated about like how different teams might be able to attack their defense because they are
Attack
ranked so high.
the
The Thunder's
Wolves?
defense, just
Oh,
because
the
they're
Thunder.
so hot, like highly ranked, like and they're so difficult to play. I'm just so curious about it and so curious about the trends of the league. Like you said, like Julius Randle was making so many threes in that first game, and I was like, damn, like I didn't think Julius Randle had it in him. I'm surprised by this. And then it's just not been the same since. Probably shouldn't rely on that shot from Julius Randle all the time. His strength's definitely in the paint and like bullying people. Can't do that against this team. Yeah, they're just swarming way too much and locking the paint up. There are times where you can swing it to an open guy in the Wolves and DiVincenzo, like you said, like they were still scoring. DiVincenzo hit shots, Nas hit some shots, and I'm like, am I supposed to just like take away that the best way to attack them is hitting outside shots? Because what else are you gonna do? You're driving in, you're gonna turn it over. Like the Celtics last year, probably could have a very good chance at beating this Thunder team by nature of they have
Yeah, the
dudes who
Celtics are
can.
like, no
Yeah,
paint, no problem.
yeah.
Like,
And it's
um,
just so tough for teams that are relying on the paint.
yeah,
And but I sometimes think it's not just as simple as like, yeah, you just shoot a bunch of threes, you make them against this Thunder team, you win. But that could be the case against a ton of defenses. We don't have to like
yeah,
belabor this point
of
too much,
course.
but
No, Will is just like, there's gotta be a way to break
yeah,
this
how are we gonna
so-called
do this?
historic defense. My thing is every defense is breakable. It is
Yes.
difficult. I will say it is difficult to beat the Thunder on offense when they're playing with this level of intensity on defense. But I think schematically there are ways to beat them. One of the things with Denver is in the games where they were able to create good offense, it was based on quick decision making. Like that's one of the reasons that I think if there is any team of those left that could provide like a real challenge for OKC's defense, it's the Pacers. Um and we'll see how that works out. We're gonna talk about their series in a bit, but if they do make the finals, like I think that should actually be an interesting finals. I have no idea how they're gonna stop OKC, but I don't know how either team is gonna stop each other. Um, so we'll see a little bit more on that if the Pacers make the finals. So I want to get to the Timberwolves because they're down 1-3 in this series, heading back to Oklahoma City. And I'm gonna be honest, I think the Thunder finished this in 5. They're at home. Their guys are gonna hit shots again. That was the other thing with this game is that role players were hitting shots. It wasn't just Shea, J-Dub, and Chet. All the role players were hitting shots on the road in game 4, and I think that was a big deal because when the Thunder aren't hitting shots, their offense looks anemic, especially if you're playing Shea, the way that you should. Um, but every offense looks bad when guys aren't hitting shots, right? So, whatever. But I think they're gonna finish this in 5. I kind of want to write Minnesota's obituary right now.
Okay.
As sad as it sounds, this is going to be the second year in a row they make the conference finals. And they likely lose in 5, maybe 6, right? How close was Minnesota to winning the championship this year?
I don't think as close. I'm gonna say
As
it's
close as what?
as the Nuggets, I'll say. Because
Interesting.
last time we said, you asked me the question about the Nuggets, how close were we? Because, you take the Thunder to 7, but you also took the Clippers to 7. This time, yeah, I think this series could be wrapped up in 5, or definitely going to be 6, I think. I would be shocked if this goes to 7. Um, Heading into the season, the Cat and Julius Randle trade, it's so interesting, this comparison, and that both of these teams are in the
Both
conference
teams might
finals.
just go out in 5 in the conference finals, though, which is like, yeah, it's a big deal. Like, you did get there, and we're gonna talk about the awesome game that Cat had.
Yeah,
In
because
game 3.
Cat's had times in the conference finals where he's been good, times where he's just not been almost playable, which is weird. Julius Randle is kind of similar, where he had a good start to the series, and now he's like,
That was the other thing is that Finch didn't close with Julius in the last 2 close games. So obviously didn't in game 3 because it was a blowout, but in games 2 and 4 didn't close with Julius.
so earlier parts of these series, I thought the trade looked a little more even than I thought, even though in the offseason I thought the Knicks definitely won it, and I thought the Wolves were going to be much worse this year. Ended up getting back to the conference finals again. I do think a little bit fluky potentially. We have a comment from Shador. He had Warriors beating Minnesota if Steph was healthy. I do wish I could have seen what happened with that. If Steph didn't get hurt, would the Wolves have gone out in the first round? I think this series was close to a sweep if the Thunder
You
didn't
mean the
mess.
second round? The Wolves played the Warriors in the second round. They
I
played the
forgot about
You
the
blacked it
Rockets.
out, Will. I understand. It's traumatic.
Who did the Wolves beat in the first round? Oh, the Lakers.
The
God, I don't
Lakers,
even
yeah.
remember that series. Yeah, I think Minnesota, I didn't think they were going to be as formidable this year. I don't think the fact that they made the Western Conference Finals has convinced me otherwise that they have some problems. And I think they're going to like do some changes. Mike Conley's getting older, won't be back. What are they going to do with Rudy? I don't know how much you can do with him. Nas might not be coming back. They may have to like try to get someone to pair with Ant so he has less pressure on the offensive side of the ball. He's trying to improve his playmaking. He made some cool passes in that last game, but just didn't have enough to rely on against a team as good as the Thunder, especially in his own offensive bag, because he can't just like go and storm into the rim and dunk
Yeah.
it.
For sure. I think I completely agree with that. One of the observations, forget if it was game 1 or game 2, those games were pretty similar, so it doesn't really matter. You can really get dirt with pick and roll if you're like a quick pick and roll guard. It's one of the reasons that I don't think he was particularly effective against like Jamal in that series. And it's not just about like Jamal's scoring. He had some good scoring games, some not, whatever. But like pick and roll is used to initiate the action, like on the second side, whatever. Like draw help and create space for something else. That's whatever. Ant tried to go at Dort around a screen. One of the things is like they've been calling a lot of offensive fouls in this series. Honestly, they called a lot in ours too, where like Dort flops and gets that offensive foul call. Did it in both series, and I think that's probably where he can be most effective in guarding pick and roll. But when he doesn't get that call, guys create space on him easily, just kind of shedding him a bit off a screen. But Ant isn't particularly deliberate with his pick and roll attack. It's really like, can I get downhill, like you're saying? And it's not just in isolation, but also in pick and roll. Or if Dort's chasing over the screen, like, can you like create enough separation to get like a further to the side to create that three? For the most part, he couldn't in this series, at least so far. Um, and I think that's been an issue for them because they've had to go to a lot of stuff in the post, whether to set up a post up or set up a face up or set up other plays. And I think that's tough. Like I think the thing with pick and roll is a lot of people complain because you don't want to see too much of it. It can look kind of stagnant sometimes, but there's a reason it's a tried and true method. And if you're a guard that's good at it and you can just keep going to it over and over and over again to create offense for yourself and others and your team, it's like all else fails. I know I can break this defense with pick and roll and we can get something out of it. And Ant isn't there yet with his like ability to handle like bracket coverage and pick and roll and fully read the defense in that sense. And I think that is maybe going to inform their next moves, but we'll see. Especially when you're talking about a floor that has Rudy Gobert, Nikhil Alexander Walker, and Julius Randle there, and like nobody is respected as a shooter, and Jaden McDaniels for that matter, right? We do need Nikhil Alexander Walker. We needed him 2 years ago, Shador. I've been calling for it, and so has Swipa.
Damn, he had such a good game in that
He did.
loss. Oh my god, his
He was bad
shooting.
against us last year, which is really funny. But like he's just like a good like third ball handler option. If you're not relying on him to like run your second unit, but like he can initiate every so often, he's willing to shoot and he can get downhill. He had this one insane finish in this game. Well, do you remember the one? I think it was in the second half of that game. He's coming down the lane and it's like this weird, like twisting reverse layup that I had no idea he had in his bag.
He was just like on another level.
Yeah, it was, like, over Chet too. It was crazy. It's nice to see people make layups. I
Hmm.
miss that's the other thing against OKC. It's like, okay, the layups you do get, you gotta make those. Like, it's just so you think they were closer than Denver, even though they made the
Sure.
conference finals?
I think Denver was closer, but yeah,
Or sorry, right, you think Denver was closer,
I
even
think
though
part
the
of it
Bulls made the
was
conference finals.
I think part of it was like yeah, the seeding, the fact that Denver played OKC earlier. Like I think we would have beat the Wolves if we played them. Like if we hadn't played the Thunder, like let's say we met up in the second round, I think we would have beat them. I just don't think they're that good. I think they
The
have
Wolves.
problems. I think they have
They
flaws.
definitely have problems, like, there's a reason they were the 6th seed, all the metrics aside, which I've talked about on this show, that's like, well, all the underlying metrics say that this team should be, like, the 2nd seed, but there's a reason they lost all those close games. They have execution issues, especially in the half court in a slowed down game, and, like, the chemistry isn't always, like, fully there, and the playmaking is very iffy. The shooting is, like has a high ceiling, as we saw in game 3, but a very low floor as we saw in games 1 and 2, right? Which is interesting because, class glass houses and all that coming from a Nuggets fan. I know it's very, very rich. He's kind of making it tough for them to not because he's been so good for them. I'm pretty curious what Naz Reid is going to get in free agency or get offered from like other teams, as I'm sure the Wolves would love to keep him, but I don't know that they're going to be able to unless they can guarantee him a starting spot, and not just the spot, but the associated salary because they don't have another, like, if Julius is off the roster. But Julius also has a player option this summer, which makes things complicated for Minnesota from a front
The other
office
thing is, yeah,
perspective.
you extend him, harder to trade him. Because I'd be like, if he's under a certain salary, he's a good trade piece.
You're talking about Julius?
Yeah, like
Right.
depending on how high it gets, I think you can really deter teams from wanting to take that on. But I still think he's like a piece you could flip. But if you extend it, that's just pushing that out. To
Well, if
like,
he just takes his option, then he becomes an expiring contract, which could
mm,
also be flipped for
which they should hope.
whatever.
Yeah, definitely don't extend it. That's just a terrible idea.
Yeah.
See what he does with the option and then go from there.
Yeah. I'm curious what other teams think of Julius Randle. I think he's had a good playoffs overall. Honestly, it's surprising to me that he made it this long on this Wolves team without it being like apparent that like you could just completely swarm him and ignore these other guys on the floor. Um, one of the things that Finch didn't do yesterday, and I kind of understand why, is go like Julius the 5 for any long stretches. It was a lot of Rudy on the floor. They needed him for defense because the as much as the Wolves were getting generally cooked in this series, the non-Rudy lineups were just non-viable defensively. But the point of those lineups is to try to get something going offensively, get Julius with some spacers around him, and kind of, get a more quicker paced game and all that stuff. They didn't really.
Julius just is able to bully, especially people on the Lakers like Rui Hachimura. Can't really do that to anyone on the Thunder. Even their
I mean, you
guards.
can, but the problem is they're not gonna let you get the ball.
Yeah,
Like
and
that's
that
the
too. It's hard
you
to
have to
make an
be.
entry pass. Ugh,
They're not a methodical team.
no.
Uh,
And they're supposed
like you have to
to.
be both methodical and but like deliberate. Like you have to be a quick decision maker, and it's tough because sometimes you can look like it's good because all the decision making is quick when you're just operating on instinct, but then you end up also making a lot of mistakes, and that's the conundrum of this Thunder defense, right?
Mhm. LA Abagnale says we need to get Nas on our team. It is funny watching Minnie and Denver going up against Oklahoma City, and it's like if we just merged our teams, we would easily destroy them. But that's probably not going to
I
happen.
mean, maybe, but
Get Jaden McDaniels, get Ant on our team,
yeah,
Jokic.
Jaden off the bench is great.
Yeah, I mean this is a completely unrealistic scenario,
Yeah.
but hey, Nas maybe not be on the Wolves next season, which I'm looking forward to because I'm tired of playing the Wolves and having this dearth of playable
We need
players.
expansion so that we can send the Wolves east already.
Yeah,
It pains me to say this. The Eastern Conference Finals, which is the more interesting and like fun series to watch, will when did the East become the fast-paced offensive conference and the West become this defensive dogfight? Because this is not the league that I remember, the league that I loved.
I don't know if Western Conference GMs look at the landscape and see how much talent there is and just say, we actually have to have people that can stop some of these dudes or we're just going to
Yeah,
die. Versus
completely
the
agree.
East, where it's like, hey, like
Eh,
we just outscore some people. We probably could go pretty
like we
far.
just do our own thing. Like we're not really worried
Yeah,
about,
or that
well,
too.
like we got to stop Jalen Brown,
Hmm.
like,
There's just less to
uh,
have to scheme for, I think.
in terms of the individual talent anyway. You just need kind of overall good dudes on your team. Like you don't need like you a Jaden McDaniels might be like overkill defensively in the East in terms of like a single individual defender. Now, to be fair, the Knicks do have OG Anunoby, who is all defense caliber. I don't think he made it this year because the Knicks weren't good defensively. sometimes depoy caliber guy that made them a good defensive team for large stretches of last year. But obviously the roster composition changes a bit this season. But I've thought about that exact thing. I think GMs in the West are like, how do we stop these specific dudes, right? Like we had KCP and he was the stop. Like we needed a guy for Steph Curry and they got KCP, right?
Mm-hmm.
And who else? Like it was a lot of small guards. Like it was like we need KCP to stop all these small guards in the West, but now the West isn't small guards anymore. Which is interesting. All right, let's talk about game 3 because that's the fun one. Obviously, this series is now 2-1 Pacers. The Pacers won their first 2 games in New York, and then the Knicks won game 3 in Indiana. Home court, schmome court, right?
So weird.
If you like our content, please remember again to hit that like button and hit the subscribe button as well as the notification bell so that you can get all of you never miss a show. Get all the notifications so you never miss a show. Leave us a review. We're on Spotify, Apple Music, and Amazon Music. This podcast should be up there, within a day or so. All our social links are in the description. And always remember that winning is fun and losing sucks. Because then you got to watch all these other teams playing in the playoffs.